Well, let's get going here. So first I want to ask you about, we'll start with the offense here, then we'll go to the defense. What are your takeaways right now, I guess, what everyone in the nation, not just Buckeye Nation, is talking about when it comes to the quarterback battle, Lincoln Keenholz and Julian Sand? What are you seeing on the field? What are your takeaways, and what are the coaches saying?
Yeah, I mean, I know nobody wants to hear it. We don't want to hear it when Ryan tells us this, but it is still very, very early to make a whole lot of evaluations of this. Now, don't get me wrong. There are times where, there are things you can draw from, and as they get into this second week, first full week of camp now, and camp picks up, the pads are on. I believe they'll have their first scrimmage day on Saturday. It's starting to become evaluation period time for sure. But just from what we've seen in the first few practices, they both had their moments. Look, that's just the way it is. They've had their moments where one guy has really put a strong foot forward, and then the next day maybe it was the other one. On Saturday, which is the most recent practice we've seen, it was Julian who had the better day of the two. I don't think anybody would argue that Julian had a better day. We saw the whole practice start to finish, which they finished with a team portion where it's for the most part good on goods. And Julian had a pretty strong showing in that, and had a strong showing earlier in the day as well in the 7-on-7 portions and things like that. So I'm not going to sit here and say that anything has happened, that one is taking a significant stride forward in the job, or is starting to separate. But certainly our last impression was, from Julian having the better day of the two. And look, I know me personally, I still think that it's Julian's job to lose. I don't think the margin's significant that Lincoln can't go win that job with a strong couple weeks and a strong showing in scrimmages, which is really when guys separate from from others, not just at quarterback, but any position. So that's not to say that can't happen, but I still think it's Julian's job to lose. And, our latest impression was, that Julian had the better day.
So far from the two quarterbacks, and honestly, even Tavian St. Clair, what are the things that most impressed you about the three quarterbacks?
Well, make no mistake about it. Of the three, Tavian is probably the most physically impressive. If you look at Tavian, he looks like the prototype that you would want to play quarterback, at the highest of levels in college football. Just from so he's a little bit thicker. He has the athleticism as well to look like he could be a factor in both elements of the offense. So it's impressive. And Ryan said in the past, going back to the spring, that the only thing holding Tavian back is experience, and that's true. And I haven't seen that come to fruition necessarily in the moments we've seen him in camp, but I can only imagine when they go back and review the film, some of the things that maybe he just doesn't pick up on. But when you just watch him just throw the football around and move around, and especially when the way he throws on the run, which was a strength of his, and was one of the big reasons why he shot up recruiting rankings as well. It's impressive. I asked this question back in the spring and spring practice when Ryan talked about experience being the one thing holding him back. If there was any way you could simulate experience, and Ryan said he would love to talk for an hour about the ways he's tried to, even going into his NFL days, tried to simulate experience. And there's just no real way to do it other than just throwing him out there in scrimmage settings and practice, and certainly in games. So Tavian's behind, but physically he certainly is the most impressive of the three. With Julian, you just noticed just the pure passing, the pure arm talent, the effortless release, beautiful tight spirals. He displayed a really strong accuracy on Saturday. There was a drill where they were just throwing, go routes into the end zone, and he just dropping them in bucket time and time again. Just a beautiful ball, and dropping them in the bucket to end the end zone. Guys not having to slow up, catching them stride. Just again, take that for what it's worth. They're throws on air to receivers that are uncovered. So, but again, you just see when Julian throws the football. It looks a little bit different, and I know people will say that, and you're like, well, what do you mean by that? I don't know how to explain it. I just know when you watch Julian throw the football, it just looks cleaner. And then Lincoln's a combination of, what I think Tavian's going to be and what I think Julian is, what he is now for the most part, in the sense that, he looks like a great athlete who maybe is still not quite the pure passer that Julian is, but capable enough. Don't get me wrong, but certainly brings another element to the offense. And I've told people this before. If in another world, if Chip Kelly doesn't leave Ohio State, Lincoln Keenan fits everything that you would want, from a Chip Kelly offense. But and we are where we're at. So again, if you're looking for a pure passer and a guy who just oozes, talent with throwing the football, It's Julian, without question. But with a year of experience under his belt, with I guess I should say 2 years of experience under his belt for Lincoln and being in the program, he certainly, if he doesn't, he looks like he has plenty of confidence, and I can only imagine that he does. But he certainly exudes confidence out there. It looks like he's in control of things as well. I just tend to believe that Julian has a higher ceiling than Lincoln does.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I also agree with that. For Julian, have the higher ceiling, especially like when you watch I was watching a clip of them throwing the football, and don't get me wrong, like I think it was the clip of them throwing the deep balls, the first air.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can clearly see. I think because Lincoln's a bigger, he doesn't have to lean, but he doesn't have to use much effort, I guess, into getting the ball down there as Julian does. But Julian's release, of course, is very, very quick. Over the last few years, Ryan Day always talks about when it comes to quarterbacks, and everyone thinks that Ryan's going to name a quarterback before the fall. He's never done it.
Right.
This is not what he's going to do. I think the only time he hasn't was because CJ Stroud came back, and
right.
Well, of course, there was no reason to. So, but he always talks about high level consistency.
Yeah.
Right now, who do you, unless you're not seeing it at all, who's showing that more right now?
Well, you're absolutely right. Ryan loves to say, he's looking for a guy who's going to make the routine plays routinely and take care of the football. So those are the 2 things. Now, look, I'm pretty sure Julian got picked off in one of maybe it was a 7-on-7 portion on Saturday, which is going to win him no favor with Ryan or with Billy Fessler in the quarterback room. So there's still that element as well. Lincoln got picked off, I believe, on Friday in one of those sessions. So, which, look, they're going to happen. I'm not saying that's a damning thing by any means, but Ryan talks about winning, making those routine plays routinely and protecting the football, and then goes on to, being good on third downs and in the red zone. So, which we haven't seen a lot of the situational football yet in terms of third downs or just strictly red zone stuff. So I can't speak to that. So consistency wise, I wouldn't say one has been more consistent than the other, because I've seen good and bad from both. I think on Saturday, Julian was certainly more consistent of the 2. So if you just want to take our most recent showing and what we saw then, I would definitely say Julian was the more consistent of the 2 there. But just over the stretch of 3 practices that we've seen, I wouldn't say one's been more consistent than the other.
So moving on to another position, offensive line. So I've kind of just assumed, about a month or so back, they said that Austin Cerebell, who's also award of the Iron Buckeye Award, which is a big deal for those who don't know, they say he's going to start. Now, the question was whether it be right guard or right tackle for me. And is it going to be right tackle for him? Then Tegra kind of solidify that right guard spot?
That's the way I feel. I was on the radio on Sunday yesterday, and they asked about the offensive line, and I just went ahead and said I believe that the offensive line is solidified. If you ask me right now, if I had to bet it, I would say the 5 they're solidified. It's going to be Luke, Carson, and Tegra in the middle, which we all feel strongly that probably are, just with the returning experience. And the question is those 2 tackles. I think Ethan Onyanwa, he better start at left tackle, because when you look at this guy, he's going to be a future first-round pick. If Tyler Bowen's any good at all at developing offensive linemen, Ethan Onyanwa is going to be a first-round pick, because he is truly the prototype of what you want from a cornerstone left tackle, especially now that he's slimmed down and he's put a lot of work in the offseason to get his body right. And then on the flip side, Austin's going to start somewhere. He's done everything. Ryan said at every turn, whether he was asked about Austin or not, he finds a way to bring Austin up, and has since spring practice. So Austin's going to start. He's done everything to get himself ready to start, as Ryan said. So I can only assume that's at right tackle, which is where he's working now. Now, the caveat being, I guess the one thing you could say is, there were times last year where Tegra was up and down. So if they feel like Austin gives them a better, more consistency at right guard, a guy like Ian Moore or even Philip Daniels, the other transfer they brought in, those 2 guys, if they can get the job done at right tackle and they feel better about that, I can see that happening. But I've got to believe that Tegra is going to take some kind of step forward from what he did last year, having started basically a whole season. And if he does, he takes any step forward whatsoever, he's one of their 5 best offensive linemen, which makes Austin your starting right tackle. So long story short, I think from left to right, Ethan Onyanwa, Luke Montgomery, Carson Hinsman, Tegra Shabola, and Austin Cerebell is your starting offensive line. And I would be very surprised if that's not the case when they take the field against Texas on August 30th.
You brought up a name I actually want to bring up when it comes to the depth of the offensive line spot. You brought up Philip Daniels.
Yeah.
How has he how has he been performing here early in camp? And then another name I want to ask you about, a guy I not personally have close ties to, but we're from the same area here in West Michigan, Gabe Van Sickle, who I'm
Yeah.
very high on. Northwestern commit before out of Coopersville, was about 10 minutes away from where I live. But yeah, committed to Northwestern, came to Ohio State. What do you see out of those two guys at the guard spot?
Yeah, look, I mean, Gabe Van Sickle could find himself, in the two deep. To be honest with you, he's doing really well. He could absolutely find himself on the two deep as one of those, first guys in if there's an injury, depending on how they want to restructure the offensive line. As we saw last year, they could toy. They had the versatility again this year that I wasn't sure that they had last year. The depth I didn't think they had. Frankly, I didn't think they had the depth that they had last year, and maybe they didn't necessarily, but they were able to move some guys around that were already still in the starting lineup. They have the same thing again. Austin Searbell being a big part of that because he can play both guard and tackle. But they have depth in terms of not having to switch a lot around as well. And Gabe Van Sickle is absolutely one of those guys. Phillip Daniels, he's been up and down for me. I think at times in the spring game he just didn't look very good. Now, frankly, that's a tough sell to get there that late and try to find your footing at a place like Ohio State and then go out and perform in front of 60,000 people or whatever it was for the spring game. I've seen more up and down from Phillip Daniels, running primarily with the twos, obviously, in camp this year. So, or this past week. So I still think that he's a solid depth piece, but I will also say that, Ian Moore is, if I had to guess, if there was, if one of those tackles got hurt and they didn't shuffle it around or anything, and they were just bringing somebody, from behind those guys, Ian Moore is probably the next tackle in there. And oh, by the way, I don't know if he gets there by the end of camp, but Jake Cook, a true freshman, looks fantastic. And I know, the idea of a true freshman playing significantly for, a team at that level is tough to get to, but just for what it's worth, I mean, he looks great, and without having watched film or, being able to talk to Tyler Bowen. We talked to Tyler Bowen next week, next week. So it'll be fun to ask him about Jay Cook and a lot of these guys, but he looks good. Gabe's been really good. I'll tell you another name that's been really impressive. He was especially impressive on Saturday was Javon McFadden. So he was, some of their positional drill stuff that they did, some of the matchups he had against some of the guys that are going to play significant snaps for Ohio State on the defensive line. He was winning. He was just stoning some guys, just flat out stoning some guys in those one-on-one matchups. So it was impressive to see from him as well. Certainly not a guy that I thought I'd be talking about, especially this early in camp, but he was impressive, and I wasn't the only one who took notice of it either. So, look, the Ohio State offensive line, the depth there, they're in a really good place. And I can't believe we're having this conversation after last year because I couldn't have been more down on where the offensive line was depth-wise last year and their lack of their inability, frankly, to recruit at the position and restock those cupboards. But it's in a really good spot now, it appears, and especially so if they hit on these transfers. And I think they did for sure, at least on Ethan.
So last thing I want to ask you about here on the offense, guys like Jeremiah Smith, recently a lot of the roster came out. He's up to 223 pounds, which is just insane. But you have him, Brandon Ennis out there, Carnell Tate. The second group of guys, probably looking around like Mylan Graham. I'm over blanking on names. Freshman Quincy, thank you. In that second, who's performing there, and who do you think is going to kind of like shift themselves into being that fourth, fifth guy?
It's so interesting. Obviously, we do this every year because of how much talent is in that room year after year. I couldn't be higher on Mylan Graham. I know people are aware of him, and certainly after the spring game, people took notice of what he did and how he looks. But I continue to be high on it. I insist that at some point, during the season, he'll just become a household name. I understand that it's kind of seems blocked in terms of his ability to get enough snaps to do that. But every time I watch Mylan Graham, particularly when I watch Mylan Graham with the ball in his hands after the catch, I just think there's no way that Brian Hartline doesn't find a way to get that guy involved in the offense on a consistent basis, because I think I'm comfortable with saying outside of Jeremiah Smith, Mylan Graham has more, top end talent or a higher ceiling than anybody else in that receiver room. And I know Carnell Tate's a fantastic player. Make no mistake about it. Carnell Tate's as solid as they come in all aspects. And so because of that guy is going to A, have a great season this year, and B, make a lot of money in the NFL and play 10, 12 years because he's solid in every aspect. There's no area with Carnell Tate that, you have to worry about with him. but I think Mylan Graham's top end game breaking talent is higher than anybody not named Jeremiah Smith. So how they get that on the field, if that is indeed true, I have no idea what that looks like. I don't know how many snaps he gets, but I continue to beat the drum that there's just no way they can keep Mylan Graham off the field. And again, I understand Brandon Ennis is a great player as well, and Brandon is more going to be more of that slot guy, and Mylan's more truly an outside guy, but. I just think that Mylan has to get on the field because I think that's too good of an asset, too good of a weapon to keep off of it. And then Quincy's going to be in the 2 deep. Quincy's going to be in the 2 deep as a true freshman. I asked Jeremiah about it in spring practice, and he said Quincy's definitely next up. So everything we've seen, all indications are he is indeed next up. He looks like he's physically ready for the role now, and just. As such as life at Ohio State, he's stuck behind some really, really good players, but he looks physically ready to do it now. And I think he'll be on the 2 deep, which means he's an injury away from, announcing himself to the college football world as a true freshman.